On today's show, Kevin Durant and the Houston Rockets come to terms on a very team-friendly contract extension, what this means for both sides going forward, and how it impacts the Tari Eason contract negotiations. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Fridays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts, or on YouTube, just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. On today's show, the news: Kevin Durant inking a 2-year, $90 million contract extension with the Houston Rockets. It looks like, fingers crossed, KD is going to try and retire a member of the Houston Rockets. We're going to break down that contract extension, what it means for KD, what it means for Houston going forward. We'll take a look at the financial outlook for this Rockets team over the next couple years, with some other, big time contracts coming down the pipeline, eventually having to pay him in Thompson, all that stuff kicking in down the way, as well as what all this means for Tari Eason's possible contract extension, with the deadline being the Monday night before the start of the NBA regular season. So we'll talk about all of that on today's show. First, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, $5 only. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. Head on over to FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being one of our amazing everydayers. All right. Let's get to the breaking news. We'll get to the language here on it from Shams Charania himself. Houston Rockets star Kevin Durant has agreed to a 2-year, $90 million contract extension with the franchise. His business partner and boardroom CEO, Rich Kleiman, tells ESPN. The new deal includes a player option in the final year of the contract's 27-28 season. Durant was eligible for a max extension of $120 million, but understood when he chose the Rockets as a trade destination that he'd be sacrificing money, in this case around $30 million less, so that the sides can partner for the long term and give the franchise team building flexibility. Last thing here from Shams: Kevin Durant now holds the record for the highest career earnings in NBA history at $598.2 million based on current and future salaries, surpassing LeBron James, who's currently at $583.9 million. He has a total of 3 years and $144.7 million on his current contract. That was a mouthful to get through. All right. This is incredible news for the Rockets, because you could have gone into the season without having, the extension figured out with KD, and they could have done the extension some way at some point in the middle of the season. Like, this isn't the same situation as the Tari thing, where there's like a deadline, a cutoff on inking the extension. They could have continued these negotiations, but getting it done before the season just removes that little bit of a cloud that could have been lingering over, or like maybe if things start to go awry really early on in the season and things don't look as good as both sides thought they would. Obviously, Kevin Durant's side and the Rockets side, right? Maybe the marriage isn't as productive as everybody thought that it would be. There still could have been that out, right? KD would have only been under contract for this season. If things got really, really bad in Houston, he could have been like, you know what? We tried, cool. I made a pit stop, and now I'm going to go find a different place. This shows commitment on both sides, in particular from Kevin Durant's side, that he is sacrificing a lot of money to give the Rockets the financial flexibility that they need moving forward to continue to field a team that both Kevin and obviously the organization feels like is a championship caliber roster. That is a lot of cheddar cheese to give up. I know it's funny, we're talking about like he just got like 2 years, $90 million guaranteed, and we're like, oh my God, pay cut. Like that's generational wealth money right there for a lot of people. But to give up $30 million total, $15 million a year against what he could have been making on a max contract. That's the difference between adding, between KD getting just top dollar versus being able to add or retain a legitimate like seventh man rotation guy, MLE level player off the bench. Like that's a legitimate game changing, team changing amount of money to be able to keep off of KD's book and be able to reallocate somewhere else, maybe to a guy like Tari Eason down the line. We'll talk about him in a little bit. So big time kudos to Kevin Durant, his camp, and the Rockets for being able to come to terms on a deal that, I mean, shoot, when we first started talking about the idea that KD might be willing to take a pay cut, the number we threw out there was like $100 million across 2 years, right? That would have been a $10 million pay cut. And even that felt like kind of a stretch. Like that's an 8-figure pay cut across 2 seasons at the end of this player's career. But at this point, and Kevin Durant did confirm this the other day, and I forget if it was via Starting Five or via SI Now, but basically he said he wants to retire in Houston, right? He feels good about being in Texas again. He loves it here. He feels at home here. And it very much feels like this is a partnership that looks like this is going to be the final stop of Kevin Durant's career. And hopefully it's a productive stop with at least a title or two along the way. And by sacrificing this money, Kevin gives the Rockets that financial flexibility to be able to continue to field the right championship caliber roster around him to give them ultimately the best shot at winning a title. And look, as long as KD and the Rockets aren't aspiring to plant any trees anytime soon, this is a fantastic deal for both sides, right? And it shows a level of sacrifice and commitment to the idea of winning from Kevin and from his camp. And it shows that the Rockets, well, now the Rockets have to hold up their end of the bargain, right? They have to figure out what they're going to allocate that money to. And maybe it's Tari Eason. Maybe they strike terms on a deal ahead of the deadline Monday evening, and they lock down Tari Eason long term. And maybe this is the nudge that they needed to be able to get that final deal done. I kind of expected that they would finish the Tari deal first and then get the Kevin Durant deal done. But as we're going to take a look here in just a moment at the financials of the Rockets moving forward, maybe it kind of worked out in their favor that they finished off the Kevin Durant deal, and now they're able to pivot and go back to Tari and his camp and say, hey, this is what we have. This is our financial roadmap for the next few years. This is where you fit in. Either take it or leave it. And that's going to be, and then it'll be up to Tari Eason to decide whether he wants to be a part of this contending level, championship level Rockets team, or if he wants to potentially take his talents elsewhere. So fantastic news for the Rockets to get this done ahead of the regular season. Very exciting stuff all around. Coming up, we're going to dive into the financials of what this means for both sides moving forward, for Kevin Durant, for the Rockets, how it impacts other players, and then we'll get into the situation with Tari Eason and how all of this impacts his contract negotiation going forward. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with their brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. The Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monarch. Let's be honest. Look, most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth between 401ks, savings, and different investments. It's really easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your smartphone. Monarch is fantastic because it helped me actually organize my spending, because they have great categorization tools. And for me, the worst feeling was, you get dinged with like that $15, $25, $30 a month like subscription, and then you're like, oh man, I should have canceled that. Okay, my bad. I'll get to it later, and then you never do, and then fast forward a month and you get dinged again. Right? It's the worst feeling ever. Now I organize my monthly spending better, and I'm more in control of my finances thanks to Monarch. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, taking a look ahead at the kind of financial outlook for this Rockets team, at least for the 2026 offseason, right? We're not going to go like super deep into the financial roadmap of like 2, 3, 4 years down the line, but just looking at next season, basically. The Rockets now have 9 guys under guaranteed contract for next season. And I say guaranteed. Fred VanVleet does have a player option on his contract for that $25 million, but Fred's going to opt into that, so that's pretty much a guarantee at this point. So KD will be the highest paid player at $45 million. Alperen Sengun clocks in at second at $35.6 million. Fred is at $25 million. Jabari at $23.6. And then we're down to kind of the role players, and then Amin Thompson, who's going to be on the final leg of his rookie extension, with Dorian Finney-Smith at 13.3, Steven Adams at 13, Amin will be making 12.2, Reed Shepherd 11.1, and then Clint Capela just over $7 million, assuming all 9 of those guys are still on the roster as of next offseason, which currently leaves Tari Eason as a projected restricted free agent, which hopefully, fingers crossed, is not the case. And we'll talk about his contract stuff here in just a second, as well as Aaron Holiday, Josh Okogie, Jayshawn Tate, and Jeff Green coming in as unrestricted free agents because all of them are signed to currently just 1-year vet minimum deals. So what does this all mean for the Rockets and kind of their financial outlook moving forward? First off, the numbers to really pay attention to here. This past offseason, we talked a lot about the first apron and the Rockets being hard capped at the first apron. They are likely going to have to operate as an above the first apron team this next offseason. The only reason they're not doing so this offseason, as a quick refresher, is the sign and trade deal that they made for Clint Capela. Any sign and trade deal automatically hard caps you at the first apron, meaning you cannot go even $1 over that number. And I actually can't remember off the top of my head if like the way that they orchestrated the KD deal also technically counted as a triggering of the first apron. I don't think it did. But anyways, basically the moves that the Rockets made this offseason put a hard cap on what they could spend on their roster this season, which is why they're in the position where even though they have the 15th roster spot open, they literally cannot go out and sign somebody because they do not have the money to do so. They will be able to go sign somebody for a prorated vet minimum deal as soon as January 8th, I believe. So that'll be the earliest that the Rockets can go out. And if there's somebody on the free agency market that is down to sign a vet minimum deal to come to Houston, they can grab that person and bring them in if they want like an additional ball handler or guard, whoever's out there, right? So that is still a possibility down the line. But as it pertains to what the Rockets have under contract moving forward, those 9 guys that we just named off, and the question mark regarding Tari Eason and his future deal, what it means is basically the Rockets have up to about $25 million a year to offer to Tari Eason via rookie scale extension. Now, they're not going to offer him that full $25 million a year, and that's why we're seeing the stalemate that we've seen so far, because ultimately, Tari feels like his value is probably more in line with what Jabari Smith Jr. received, right? He got the 5 years, $122 million, whatever it was. He's making 23.6 starting next season, right? So Tari probably feels that his value is at least closer to, or if not completely in line with Jabari Smith Jr.'s value. Now, at the end of the day, unfortunately, it's not, for a variety of reasons, just because Jabari's going to be a starter. Tari's coming off the bench more than likely. Jabari is a shooter. He's more versatile with his positionality across, being able to play small ball 5 all the way down to the 3. Like there's certain things that Jabari brings that Tari doesn't. And so I think when you start to weigh the two like next to each other, there's also things that Tari does that Jabari can't. But realistically, the Rockets struck that deal with Jabari super, super fast, and they didn't waste any time with it. They got him under lock and key very quickly. And I don't want to say that they waited on Tari, but they prioritized getting Jabari done, and they prioritized Jabari for a reason, because they felt that Jabari getting his deal done sooner, quicker, was the higher on their priority list ultimately at the end of the day. And so now you're looking at Tari, and ultimately, one of the reasons it feels like this, they haven't been able to strike a deal yet is because Tari obviously wants more, feels like he has, deserves probably somewhere in that $20 million a year range, whether it's all the way up at 22, 23 like Jabari, or just north of 20 or whatever. And the Rockets and Rafael Stone, and this is not the first time they've done this, and it certainly won't be the last time that they've done this. Rafael Stone has had a history of kind of, playing hardball in these kinds of contract negotiations, right? Rafael Stone is he was a contracts lawyer before becoming general counsel for the Rockets, and then eventually elevating all the way to the general manager role. And so he values a good contract. He values winning these deals, right? And we saw it with Alperen Sengun. Everyone is scratching their head. Alp earned his contract. Why are they playing hardball? Why are they waiting? And now Alperen Sengun's on an absolute steal of a deal for the next 5 seasons, right? So this is just another iteration of Rafael Stone trying to get the best, trying to extract the most value he possibly can from these negotiations, running it all the way until the finish line. Both sides would like this relationship to continue. The Rockets want Tari in Houston, and Tari wants to be in Houston, right? Like that, there's no question about that. It's just about finding a number that works for both sides. And here's the rub, is whatever money that the Rockets are able to save by not paying Tari Eason, that's money that they're going to be able to then turn around and go utilize without eventually dipping into the second apron. And that's where things start to get really, really gross, is with all the penalties associated with being in the second apron, and especially with Amin Thompson's rookie scale extension coming down the pipeline down the way. And potentially if Reed hits the way that they think he can, then, maybe Reed's extension is something to be, considering as well in their, down the line financial roadmap. There's all these different considerations, right? It's not just about, oh, well, the Rockets have up to $25 million a year. Just give Tari a $20 million. No, they've got financial experts, and Eli Whitus is sitting there with his, whiteboard drawn out for the next 12 years of Rockets finances, probably not that long, but the next 5-year roadmap of finances probably, and figuring out where they have the wiggle room to operate. And at least as this team is presently structured, right, you can retain Tari Eason. And if you can retain Tari and keep that number, the lower that number gets, the more wiggle room you have to then, again, go out and add another impact player via the taxpayer MLE. And that's going to be the difference between, if you just kept Tari and you paid him, out of that available, I think it's 24 million, actually not 25, but out of that available $24 million between, where you're at and the second apron, if you give Tari 22 of that, then you don't have anywhere near as much wiggle room to operate with the the taxpayer MLE to be able to go out and add one more important depth piece. And we've seen just how valuable the teams are that have an adequate amount of real depth, right? We're talking like legitimate 12 deep teams that have 12 viable rotation guys. And this isn't a slight to the stay ready crew or the guys that are at the end of the bench, the vet minimum guys, Holiday, Okogie, Tate, Green. But if you could turn one of those roster spots into a taxpayer MLE type player, somebody making, whatever the number is going to be, $5 to $6 to $7 million, whatever the taxpayer MLE is for this upcoming season, that is a completely different type of player, a player that can provide a different level of impact than just those end of the bench guys who are, kind of insurance policy, or, they eat up the garbage time minutes at the end of a blowout win or blowout loss or what have you. Cause that's kind of what the stay ready crew guys provide. Right. And ultimately they have been, and the Rockets have relied on them situationally, right? They've relied on Aaron Holiday. They've relied on, Jayshawn Tate at times. They've relied on Jeff Green at times. And all of them have a certain level of play that they can reach. But it's different when you can go out and get a guy that I haven't even started looking ahead at the possible free agents for that class. But that's kind of what it boils down to, is the Rockets are trying to preserve their financial flexibility, or as much of it as possible, in regards to this Tari Eason extension, as opposed to just, hey, take the $22 million a year, whatever it is. And there's also certain other angles of these negotiations that I'm sure that Rafael Stone and company are using when talking to Tari Eason about it. So let's, coming up, we're getting into our final segment. What value do we really think Tari Eason is worth? What would we feel good about as a contract extension for Tari Eason? We'll get to that here to round things out in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you do not want to miss out on. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, $5 only, and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. FanDuel is great because it gives you so many different ways to play. You can try different player props. You can build out parlays. You can even follow the live betting lines during the actual games. Or maybe you're not into all that. You want to keep it simple. Just head on over to FanDuel and take a look at the outright betting favorites to win the Super Bowl this season. Right now, the Bills and Chiefs both at plus 650. The Packers right on their tail at plus 700. The Lions plus 850. And bringing up the rear of the top five is the Eagles at plus 1,000. So for all those odds and so much more, visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Look, basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a bit of a headache sometimes between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in. The app gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I love using Game Time for Rockets tickets because they're fully transparent from start to finish. They don't hit you with hidden fees along the way, and they don't jack up the price at the last second right as you're like committed to buying the tickets and you're all emotionally invested in those seats, and they're like, actually, we're going to enjoy. None of that, right? They are what the price that you see in the bottom corner of your screen is the price that you're going to pay at the end of the ticket buying process. So take the guesswork out of buying your NBA and Rockets tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right. So I think it's worth noting here too is just as a quick aside, the Rockets, the only reason they're under these, really strict financial limitations this season and why they can't go sign that 15th guy, right, is that they're hard capped at the first apron. That's not going to be an issue or I guess the hard capping at the first apron shouldn't be an issue next season because they shouldn't be in a position to have to do any of the things that they did to build out the roster for this year, right? The sign and trade for Clint Capela, all that stuff. They've basically got their 9 core guys all under contract except for Tari Eason, right? He's their 10th guy. He's the guy that they want to be able to sign and get under contract and figure out, hopefully, knock on wood, fingers crossed, before the start of this regular season. And once they get Tari figured out, then for next offseason, the only moves left over, depending on what value they ink Tari at, would be potentially going and signing somebody with some money from the taxpayer MLE, if they have enough wiggle room there, as well as then going out and using and signing vet minimum guys to flesh out the rest of the roster, because that's the only thing that they're going to be able to do, have left to do between, where they're at, and potentially they might be a second apron team next year. Like that's the thing, is they've got wiggle room up to the second apron to get Tari signed. But then once they have Tari signed, that's when they're going to have to go out and then get those 4 or 5 other bodies to flesh out the rest of the roster. And again, even if you just did 4 vet minimum deals, the same 4 vet minimum deals they did this past year or this season for Holiday, Okogie, and Tate and Jeff Green, that's $9.2 million, right? That's going to send them over the apron threshold into or potentially into the second apron, but we'll see ultimately kind of what happens there. I think that, when we look at Tari and his production and what he's provided to this Rockets team, he projects to basically be this year's, 6th man for the Rockets. He's going to be in the running for 6th man of the year, more than likely. I think that it's really tough to be able to assign him a similar value as Jabari Smith Jr., because when you're coming off the bench, you're just first and foremost, you're just not playing as many minutes as the starters are. And Jabari's role, he's so versatile and does so many things for this Rocket team, whereas Tari is not, I won't say one-dimensional. That's not the right way to describe it. It's just, Tari has a different skill set, and he's unfortunately a little bit further behind in the depth chart, or maybe not behind in the depth chart, but just there's other guys on the roster that can give you some of what Tari can give you, whereas the only other guy on the roster that can give you what Jabari gives you is Kevin Durant. And so Jabari is very unique in that perspective. I feel like for Tari, though, it's really tough because I keep coming back to like that $18-19 million a year range for Tari. We've seen other high level role players like Tari I'm thinking like Aaron Neesmith, Andrew Nimhard, like guys like that for the Pacers. Those guys got paid and they're on what you would consider relatively team friendly deals given their production and the fact that they are starting caliber players. But a lot of this kind of boils down to what they feel like the market is going to look like next offseason. Because realistically, you could just not ink the deal and you could just let Tari be a restricted free agent this season. I don't think that is the best approach. Like, I don't think I really would hate it for both sides to just throw their hands up and be like, you know what, we'll revisit it next offseason. We can't come to terms on a deal. Because the Rockets are probably lowballing him and Tari wants a higher value contract and they're just struggling to meet somewhere in the middle, right? And ultimately, I don't know what the lowball offer is from the Rockets. It might be all the way down at like 15-16 million a year, right? Across, 4 seasons, something like that. Something like 4 years, $60 million or 4 years, 4 years, 70 million, somewhere in that range. And Tari's, might look at that and turn his nose up and be like, no, I'm an $80 million a year player at minimum, right? Like 20 million a year period is like his sticking point. And if the Rockets and Tari's camp can't come together on, what that middle ground number truly is, then, it's going to be hard to be able to, come to terms on a deal. As far as the restricted free agency stuff goes, though, the Rockets are not only just having these conversations with Tari and negotiating and trying to figure out with him, they're also looking at the lay of the land of, the rest of the NBA and trying to figure out, okay, well, what happens if we let Tari go to restricted free agency, right? Are there teams out there that we genuinely believe, and this is like me talking as the Rockets, right? Are there teams out there that we think would be willing to go and offer him above what we're currently offering him, right? Like, are there teams out there that would willingly pay Tari Eason $20 million a year to come either play off the bench, which is probably unlikely, but if a team did roll up and try to offer Tari a $20 million a year contract, for 4 years, 5 years, whatever, would he then have a starting role with another team? Would that be what he wants, right? Because it doesn't, unfortunately right now, there's not really a projection where you can envision Tari Eason in the starting lineup for the Houston Rockets for the foreseeable future. Like, once Fred VanVleet is back and healthy, he's back in the starting lineup. And KD's not going anywhere. Sengun's not going anywhere. Amin's not going anywhere. And it doesn't really seem like Jabari's going anywhere. So that could also be another part of the puzzle here is if Tari wants a bigger role, more opportunity, a chance to really shine and showcase that he is more than just a role player, that he has some, upper level potential past, being, in this little assigned box that the Rockets have kind of given him, then it would benefit him to play for another organization, a place where he can be a starter and have more opportunities. But, is it going to be for a winning team or is it going to be for like the Charlotte Hornets or something, right? Like what are we talking about here? Are you willing to, give up the opportunity to contend for and compete for titles this early on in your career, so there are some players that go their whole careers without ever really having the opportunity to contend for a title at the highest level, playing alongside a legit top 10 player in the NBA and a couple other, blossoming stars in Alperen, Sengun, and Amin Thompson, right? A top 25 guy and a top 40 guy. There's players that go their whole careers without ever having that, being that close to be able to, say that they had a legitimate shot to win a title. And so it boils down to a lot of like, what are Tari's priorities, right? Is he willing to sacrifice a little bit of that money? And it's harder to ask a player who hasn't earned a lot of money in their career to this point to sacrifice money. It's a lot easier to point to a Kevin Durant who's like, hey, KD just gave up $30 million. He's also made like well over like $500 million in his career. So it's a lot easier for KD to stomach giving up $30 million than it is for Tari Eason to give up, what is ultimately like, generational money for himself and for his family. The difference between $60 million versus say $100 million, right? Like that's a pretty sizable chunk of money. And if he feels like he can go out on the open market next summer and get a team to offer him $22, $23, $25 million a year, then I don't really begrudge him for wanting to take that chance and bet on himself. I really don't, but at the same time, that's where the Rockets have to try and look and figure out, okay, are there teams out there that would really try and poach Tari? The benefit is as a restricted free agent, the Rockets can still match whatever deal Tari would get down the line. So it's not like a foregone conclusion that if the Rockets and Tari don't agree to a contract extension, ahead of the deadline Monday night, it's not a foregone conclusion that Tari is gone. It just means that he's going to be a restricted free agent for this season, and that going into the offseason, he'll be in restricted free agency, which means the Rockets have the authority to match any contract that comes his way. The downside for Tari and his camp here is, this is the scary part, is he's a guy that has dealt with some injury stuff in his career, right? If he deals with if he gets another injury this season, if he hurts himself, or if he's, still not 100%, if he's still having to be rested occasionally because of the leg stuff that he dealt with in the past, then that's going to hurt his, basically like his market cap down the line as to how much money he'll actually be able to make in free agency. Because a team's not going to offer $25 million a year to a guy for, 4 seasons if they think that he's going to miss a quarter of the games that year, or if they don't think that he can be a starter and play 35 minutes a night healthily throughout the whole season. So these are all the different little variables and factors and things to consider and things to be concerned about, because the Rockets might have an offer on the table right now for, I don't know, we'll call it 4 years, $65 million for Tari Eason, right? That's pretty team friendly, but it comes in about $17 million a year for Tari. They might have that offer on the table, and Tari might be looking at that saying, no way, I can make way more than that next offseason. And maybe the Rockets and their offer, right, has like, maybe it's not just blanket $17 million a year. Maybe there's like raises baked in there, that kind of thing, where they could do some stuff where they front load the contract and then it has, it descends in value over time. There's all sorts of different wrinkles and weird capology stuff that the Rockets can get away with here. And I'm not an expert on it, so I don't pretend to be. But there's also a distinct possibility that like Tari isn't worth what he thinks he's worth and gets to restricted free agency next offseason, or maybe the money dries up, or maybe other teams are more preoccupied with other potential free agents on the market, or maybe there's a star player out there and he's, got everything walled up in free agency and nobody wants to commit money to anybody until the star is taken care of, and all these other variables that you can't really even begin to predict for next offseason. And there's a world where the Rockets might get Tari on a cheaper contract than what they expect to get him on right now. And so ultimately what it really boils down to is, does Tari bet on himself? What does he ultimately want? Does he want to be a starter at some point in his career? Is he okay continuing to come off the bench? Is it just about the money, or is it about the bigger role as well? Ultimately, I think I'm settling in on somewhere like, I think if the Rockets got Tari at 4 years, $80 million is probably like the absolute max that I would go, right? $20 million a year for Tari Eason across 4 years. And even that feels like, I'm not going to say an overpay, but that feels like a major concession from the Rockets to just be able to keep Tari Eason, because the likelihood of you being able to go out, if Tari Eason does elect to test out restricted free agency, what have you. And this is the part that, this is the frustrating part here, is if you don't come to terms on a deal, then I feel like the Rockets almost have to do their due diligence this season and ahead of the trade deadline to see what kind of a return you could get for Tari Eason. Because if there is an internal number that the Rockets are unwilling to go past, right? Maybe that number's 17 million a year. Maybe it's 18, maybe it's 20, whatever that number is internally that they do not want to go past for Tari Eason's average annual value. If they truly believe that there are other teams in the NBA that would be willing to offer that number this upcoming offseason to Tari as a restricted free agent, therefore meaning that even though the Rockets have the right to match that contract, they wouldn't, because it messes up their financial roadmap for what they need down the line to be able to take care of Amin Thompson and Reed Shepherd and all these other contracts that they have to worry about coming down the line. Then you almost have to figure out what Tari's worth and explore some potential trade scenarios for him throughout the season, because otherwise you run the risk of losing him for absolutely nothing the following offseason. And that's a really tough spot to be in. Hopefully both sides are able to come to terms on a deal here and figure out, something that makes sense for both parties. But otherwise, you're going to go into the season, and if there's no deal struck, then that's going to be a little bit of a lingering cloud, right? There's going to be some basically you don't want to see it turn into a whole, the Jonathan Kuminga thing, like with the Warriors, how long that saga dragged on for, and that there's probably hurt feelings on both sides now. And you don't want to see it devolve into a situation like that where it becomes, a concern for the locker room or team chemistry or anything along those lines. And at this point, I'm cautiously optimistic that Rafael Stone, who has found a way to masterclass a lot of these deals previously, that he'll find a way to put something on the table that is amenable to both the Rockets organizationally and to Tari and his camp. And the Rockets will be able to roll into the season with no clouds, no lingering anything, no question marks, and just have it all taken care of ahead of time. That way they have this core, this group of 10 guys locked in for the foreseeable future. And that's their contention roster right there, is these 10 guys. Well, 9 guys, because they don't have Fred this season, but basically it's those 10 guys moving forward. So not coming up. Oops. Wrong part of the show. I do want your thoughts on the Tari Eason stuff. I want your reaction to the KD contract first and foremost, and then I want your thoughts on the Tari Eason stuff. What kind of a contract would you be comfortable with the Rockets offering Tari Eason at this point? If you were Rafael Stone, put on your GM hat, what would you offer to Tari Eason? What's the most that you would do? What's the number that you'd be trying to strike up with him? Give me your thoughts in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.